Michael Church with Crawl Space Ninja. Today we got a special video that we're going to do. We're doing the essential guide to crawl space waterproofing. We feel like this is a very good topic for a lot of you out there that are doing research on how to encapsulate your crawl space and also make sure you address any flooding or potential flooding issues. So we hope you like this video. If you're new to Crawl Space Ninja, we talk about everything related to crawl space encapsulation, waterproofing, indoor air quality. We hope you'll subscribe to our channel, ring that notifications bell. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, check out our DIY store and our franchise opportunities. We have a lot to cover in this video. I thought I'd go over some of our topics that we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about waterproofing versus water management. How does water enter your crawl space? Your crawl space's #1 enemy. Crawl space sump pump installation tips. We're also going to go over a full perimeter interior French drain and why that's important. We're going to talk about properly installing the vapor barrier, which by the way is crucial to a proper waterproofing system, as well as give you some tips on downspout extensions. Make sure you're keeping those gutters cleaned and potential for French drains outside the house. Okay, so let's first define waterproofing versus water management. Obviously, waterproofing is a term that our industry uses synonymously with water management, but Crawl Space Ninja feels like they are two different terms. To us, waterproofing your house means that we're keeping the water from entering the home. So typically waterproofing is done on the outside of the foundation when the home is built. Perhaps they'll put some type of tar, which normally fails pretty quickly. They'll do footer drains around the house that normally fail pretty quickly. Downspout extensions to help get that water away from the foundation. But if that outside waterproofing membrane or vapor barrier or whatever they put on that outside of the house fails, and then that footer drain fails because of the construction that happened around the home, water has nowhere to go but inside the house, which is where we typically refer to water management. So we're not necessarily keeping the water out. We're just addressing the water once it comes in, because water that gets through the foundation and into the crawl space can lead to a lot of problems in the future. So a water management system is something where you install inside the crawl space to address water as it comes in versus a waterproofing system that keeps the water from entering at all. There are many reasons why water enters your crawl space, but we're going to give you 4 main reasons. #1 is typically that footer drain that they installed around the full perimeter of the house when they built the home. They dug out and poured the footer and then started building the block or the concrete, and then they put what's called a footer drain. Normally they're supposed to put the footer drain next to the footer, but a lot of contractors will put the footer drain on top of the footer. As time goes on, dirt, roots, different things like that enter into the house. That tree matures, that oak tree that you got outside. Your neighbors decide to do landscaping or whatever the case may be. They can cover up the exit pipe of the footer drain, or perhaps the roots has taken over the footer drain and started to clog that footer drain and making it not be able to move water efficiently and effectively away from the footer. Also, older homes that were built, say in the 60s, they used like a concrete or terracotta pipe on the outside, which gets crushed and broken. And unlike some of the modern technologies that they have today, which typically are plastic, those pipes can be crushed or broken, or soil shifts and starts to destroy them and making them ineffective. So the #1 reason we see crawl spaces flood is a failed footer drain. The second reason why your crawl space is taking on water on top of a footer drain, if you've got a downspout that is clogged, or perhaps the gutters are not cleaned properly, or on a semi-annual basis, you'll start to get water overflow the gutters and then roll down the foundation of the house. Plus the rainwater, even with properly installed gutters, you still got a lot of rainwater that hits around that foundation too. And if that footer drain has failed, that membrane that we talked about earlier has failed, that water, it's easier for the water to enter through the block or the concrete than it is to travel through some of your hard soils like clay and different things like that. So make sure you're keeping those gutters and those downspouts clear to keep that foundation water as far away as possible too. The third reason, obviously, gutters, downspouts, poor footer drain, that outside membrane that I was talking about. Most of the contractors here in East Tennessee, whenever they're building a house, they'll use this spray-on tar that they get at one of the local box stores or one of the building product stores. It's applied with a paint sprayer. that is just some of the worst stuff in the world over time. It cracks, it expands and contracts, and just does not do a good job. It's just a paint. You know, it's as effective as paint, right? If even that effective. If you're gonna do a proper outside waterproofing membrane, we recommend a rubberized waterproofing membrane. Marflex has a good one that we recommend. It's expensive, but it's, again, the foundation of the home needs to be protected. We recommend you put money towards that if you're building your house. But if you're dealing with a home that's already been built, then obviously you're going to have to dig away a lot of earth and try to waterproof it from the outside, which can be, you know, 4, 5, 6 times more expensive than an interior water management system. But normally that membrane is the third reason why you start to get that water coming in from the outside. And like I said, there are many, many reasons why you're taking on water in your crawl space, but the fourth reason I want to focus on is the water table, okay? So typically the dirt in the crawl space is lower than the dirt outside, and if you're near a lake especially, or a river, or a pond, or any kind of body of water, maybe you're on the coast, your water table tends to be a little high. I've even seen homes built on the side of mountains have high water tables because maybe there's a spring or something in the area. So if you take a lot of heavy rain or a thunderstorm, it just adds water to that water table. And of course, if the dirt in the crawl space is lower than the dirt outside, then that water table hits that crawl space before you even see it hit the outside dirt. And keep in mind, you're also fighting against that failed footer drain, that failed membrane, those downspouts and gutters that are not cleaned out properly. So it's just a good combination of a lot of bad things happening to make that crawl space flood. So who cares about standing water in the crawl space, right? I mean, it's not like you've got your furniture down there. It's not like a basement where you've got, you know, your drywall is getting destroyed and growing mold and all that. So why is it important to make sure that you're addressing flooding in the crawl space? Well, the biggest thing, the number one enemy, as I mentioned before, of your crawl space is humidity. I feel like it could even be the number one enemy of the house. But obviously, if you've got a roof leak or something like that, you might have a standing water coming in and flooding your house, and that's obviously a huge problem. But that humidity, the reason why I feel like it's the number one enemy is normally it goes undetected for a long period of time until all of a sudden you have a mold issue or a wood rot fungus issue or something like that. So a flooded crawl space, a crawl space that does not have a proper water management system, is adding to that humidity problem. If you've got your ductwork down there and you've got flooding, now the dew point is out of control, you've got cold ducts, you've got humidity rising up out of that flooded crawl space, hitting those cold ducts, creating condensation and mold issues and wood rot, plus your HVAC unit is having to run harder because it's dealing with all that humidity. You feel warmer whenever your house is humid. There's a lot of problems that flooded crawl spaces can add to the home, and the number one problem that it adds to the home is high humidity. So by addressing flooding and keeping waterproofing correct and installing that water management system, you're eliminating or helping to eliminate your home's number one enemy, which is high humidity. Now I'm going to get into the main topic of this, which is installing that interior water management system inside the crawl space. And we feel like there's more to the water management system than just a sump pump, than just a French drain. So we're going to go over some of the things that we recommend, some install tips. If you're considering doing this yourself or you're going to hire a contractor to address that flooded crawl space, here are some things that every interior water management system needs, and we're going to start with the sump pump. When choosing the correct sump pump for your crawl space, I would recommend a cast iron sump pump. The Flowtech, in my opinion, is one of the best sump pumps. It's got one of the best warranties. We have it on our DIY store. It is the only sump pump we install. It's the E50 VLT sump pump. It is a fantastic workhorse. Does about 4,800 gallons per hour of water. Of course, we also recommend that if you're going to install that sump pump, that depending on how large your crawl space is, you may need multiples. We have a rule of thumb of about one sump pump for every 140 linear feet, just to make sure that your crawl space isn't being overrun or your sump pump isn't being overrun by the amount of water it can handle. A few other notes about that Flowtech is it's very reliable. It's easy to install. It has a high flow rate. And of course, we talked about the cast iron materials that are used. The type of pump it is, it's on a float switch. So it only engages as the water builds up inside of the crawl space and engages that float, kind of like your toilet float, where the float causes the water to stop running in the toilet bowl or in the toilet basin. The sump pump, as the float engages, it causes the water to be pumped out of that basin. And it doesn't use as much power as some of the other models out there. It uses about between 6 and 8 amps, depending on whether it's ramping up or not. So it's a pretty efficient sump pump as well. Now, we've seen this time and time again. A lot of contractors will install a sump pump directly on the dirt, or they'll dig a pit and just let the sump pump just sit down in the mud. Always install a sump pump basin with a lid, a sealed lid, anytime you're installing a sump pump in your crawl space. That's going to protect that sump pump, going to protect it and keep as much soil and debris out of that pit as possible, so that that sump pump works on a regular, continual basis. So make sure you ask that question to your contractor. Are you going to put the sump pump inside of a basin? And of course, we recommend that you fill the area around the basin. You don't just dig a hole just enough for the basin to fit in. Dig a rather large hole and make sure there's gravel and other sediment around that basin to filter out. And that creates a larger area for more volume of water to enter into that basin. And also, I would recommend your French drain pipe. You stub it directly into the basin. We use the easy flow pipe, and we cut a hole and run that pipe directly into the basin so that the water can get into that basin as quickly as possible. This seems like common sense, but it also should be mentioned. Make sure that that basin and that sump pump are installed in the lowest part of the crawl space, okay? Let gravity carry that water naturally to that sump pump and that basin. If you have a pretty level crawl space, like on the coast, a lot of the homes out there are pretty level, the ground is, so the basin's going to just naturally absorb a lot of that water because the basin is lower than the pipe, so the water is just going to want to run into the basin anyway. You can pitch the pipe if you feel like that's necessary in order to get water moving faster to the basin. That can be a pretty difficult task to accomplish, especially on a large crawl space. It doesn't require a whole lot of pitch, but keep in mind that inside the pipe, as the water fills up and the basin's lower, it's just going to naturally want to flow to that basin as well. So make sure that you put that basin in the right spot, which is normally the lowest part of the crawl space. It doesn't mean it'll be next to the door. The lowest part of the crawl space could be on the other side of the crawl space. Now, that's going to be inconvenient when it comes to maintaining it, but that's still going to be the best place for it. When installing that sump pump inside of that basin, you want to make sure that you use a great check valve. We have a check valve available on our DIY store. If for some reason your contractor did not install a check valve, we recommend you go ahead and have that done. We put it directly onto the sump pump. It screws right in with threads. And what the check valve does is, as the water pumps out of the basin, it keeps that water from flowing back in and stops the sump pump from getting into a vicious cycle of only pumping out a little bit of water and it flowing back in. Backflow preventer is another term used in plumbing to keep that water from coming back into the sump pump. Because if you've got, you know, a 6 to 8, 10-foot section that you're having to pump this water out, there can be quite a bit of water in that 1.5-inch line 10 feet up in the air. And if you don't have that check valve on there, all that water, when that pump shuts off, it's going to want to roll right directly back into the sump pump, could even engage the float switch, and it just gets in this power cycle that never ends. So make sure you put on a check valve on all of your sump pumps in your crawl spaces. Okay, so I mentioned a sealed sump pump basin. The reason why we want to seal the sump pump basin is to keep little critters from getting in there. It also helps to deter soil gases from rising out of the sump pump, but it does create a problem, which if you ever get a leak from above, let's say you get a plumbing leak or something like that, your washing machine floods or your refrigerator floods or your toilet floods, you've got a problem, because now you're going to have a huge swimming pool down in your crawl space. So we always install the Dranjer drain on top of the lid of the sump pump basin. That is a place so that as that water flows to the basin. Even if it's on top of the plastic, we give it access to the basin without allowing those soil gases to rise up out of the basin, and then the water can still make its way to the pump and be pumped out. Now, you may still have a lot of damage to your vapor barrier and different things like that, depending on how significant of a flood you take from above, but you certainly don't want to create a problem like a swimming pool in your crawl space because you didn't give that flooded water a place to go inside that sump pump. And a lot of even basement waterproofers use the Dranjer drain for that purpose because it could do the same thing. If you don't give that flood water a place to go from a natural pipe leak or something like that, then it can totally flood the entire basement, even though you had that sump pump sitting there. If only the water had access to it, it would have been pumped out. Of course, maintaining a sump pump is very important. A lot of people think it's one of those install it and forget it kind of devices, but you don't want to do that. Just like your dehumidifier, you want to make sure you maintenance your sump pump on a continual basis. We actually did a video about that I'll put a link down below. It's 8 things all homeowners need to know about the sump pump. We talk about maintenance, but it keeps the zooglea, that snotty bacteria that builds up around these devices, from getting in there on a regular basis and clogging them up and creating basically a cake where the float switch can't work, or it can't engage, or it's not pumping out water properly. So most sump pumps recommend at least an annual maintenance. These basin lids have a little plastic thing you can pull off. You can reach your arm down there and you can lift the float and make sure that it's working properly. But again, your hand is pretty strong, so we recommend you pull that rubber piece off and then pour water directly in. You can use a hose or use a 5-gallon bucket and pour water into the sump pump and let it engage naturally. That way it will show you that it will work during a flood. So make sure you maintenance that sump pump at least annually, and if you don't have the ability to do that, perhaps the person that installed it could take care of it for you. One of the most overlooked devices when it comes to water management inside your crawl space or your basement is the battery backup system. Most homeowners will spend a lot of money installing a sump pump or an interior French drain water management system and fail to recognize the importance of a battery backup system. Most homes will flood more during a thunderstorm or a hurricane or a heavy rain than any other time of the year, and most homes lose power during thunderstorms and hurricanes. So if you've done all that you need to do or all that you think you can do to control that flooding, and then you fail to install that battery backup system, it's kind of like a waste, because the time you're going to need it the most, the pump isn't even going to work. Now, we recommend the SEC America line of battery backups. It's a cool system because it'll install on pretty much any type of sump pump. It's not a secondary pump. It engages the main pump only. We have the 822 and the 1622 depending on the horsepower of your pump. And down in our DIY store link, you can check out both of those battery backup systems. They switch from AC to DC. They have a marine battery that the SEC will trickle charge when it's not being used, and then when it is being used, it'll switch over to that marine battery once your house loses power. Now keep in mind that you can run those marine batteries in succession if you want to make sure that the pump runs longer, but they do have a certain amount of time that they'll run. Normally, it's based on the amount of time that the pump has to run, because the longer the pump runs, the quicker it drains the battery. So as your crawl space is flooding more often, it's going to engage more. So if you're in a situation or in a part of the country where you lose power often, I would recommend you put up to 3 marine batteries on that SEC battery backup system. But please, if you're going to install a water management system in your basement or your crawl space, make sure you have it on a battery backup system. It's super important. Also, before I move on, I want to mention that we've done several of these essential guides. We've done one on wood rot fungus and another one on crawl space encapsulation, so we'll put links to those down below. We've also done them in written format if you'd rather read or print the pages off for your reference. Maybe you're looking to do your own crawl space encapsulation or prevent wood rot, fungus, and mold, or do your own waterproofing. We've done these on blogs on our website. We do a blog a week, so if you get a chance to check those out. Another tip I want to give you, this happens quite a bit. We see a lot of contractors discharge that sump pump line into the sewer system of your house. I don't recommend you do that. The municipality does not like you doing that. As a matter of fact, a lot of municipalities, if they find that you have done that, they will fine you in certain parts of the country. So make sure you never discharge that water into your sewer system. Run it out to the road or downhill, or get it away from the foundation, but never put either your dehumidifier condensate line or your sump pump discharge into that sewer system, because if forever, I mean, even if it was not breaking some kind of rule of the municipality, if that sewage system backs up, you've just given it access directly to your crawl space, because that check valve will probably blow off because of that sewage system backing up. I've seen pictures of toilets exploding and different things like that. So you don't want to have your sewer back up into your crawl space. So never discharge it into the sewer system. Sump pumps are great, battery backups are great, but I would also recommend you get a water alarm and put right next to the sump pump. That way, if for whatever reason the sump pump isn't working properly, or maybe the battery backup hasn't worked properly, you've got an audible alarm that's going to sound horrible, that's going to get you to go down there and take a look and see what the problem is. These little alarms are very inexpensive. They're less than 20 bucks in most cases. You can get real fancy and get the ones that are Wi-Fi and all that, and they're great too. But just a cheap water alarm, we have the Watchdog type water alarm on our DIY store that's really good. That way, as water connects or contacts that system, it'll give an audible and let you know there's something going on that you need to check out. Another reason for that water alarm is, again, what I mentioned earlier about flooded crawl spaces adding to humidity. Keep in mind that most experts say that mold can grow within 24 to 48 hours after humidity spikes above 60%. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of mold growth, but even microscopic mold can set in that quickly, which can lead to bigger issues down the road. So having that water alarm to go off is just another line of defense to make sure your crawl space is healthy. The interior French drain, we've been talking a lot about sump pumps and different things like that, but you've got to give the sump pump access to the water in the entire crawl space. We recommend that if you're going to install a water management system, you do a full perimeter trench as close to the foundation wall as possible. It does not have to be at the footer. It just needs to be where the water can get access to it. Normally, it's going to be close to the surface of the soil in the crawl space. You don't have to bury it, because all you're really concerned about is surface water. You don't want the plastic to float. You want to get that water into that interior French drain and get it to the sump pump as quickly as possible. You're always going to have water under that vapor barrier. Just remember that. As I mentioned, the water table, soil has water in it naturally. Just because you build a house doesn't mean all the water under the house goes away. It's still there. So what you want to do is have that interior French drain with enough access to that sump pump quickly to get that water out before it floats the plastic. And speaking of plastic, that's probably one of the biggest problems we see contractors in our area, is they will not install a proper vapor barrier when installing water management, or what they call waterproofing inside the crawl space. The vapor barrier needs to be properly attached to the foundation wall, and the pillars overlapped and taped, and make sure that you deter that water from getting on top of that plastic as much as possible, because once that water gets on top of the plastic, it takes the sump pump out of the picture, and now your dehumidifier has to address the water. So installing a proper vapor barrier is always part of a proper waterproofing or water management system when it comes to how Crawl Space Ninja does our water management. And again, some things you can do on the outside, make sure those downspouts are extended way far away, at least a minimum of 15 to 20 feet away from the foundation. Keep those gutters clean. If you require a French drain, perhaps you're on a hill and the water's running directly at your foundation, you can maybe put a French drain uphill a little bit to capture that water and redirect it. A lot of places call it a curtain drain. So that's about all I have for waterproofing or water management of your crawl space. If you have any tips or anything you want to share, we hope you'll comment below. We hope you'll like this video and hope you make it a happy and blessed day, and we'll see you later.